In today's world, more and more employers will not even look at you without a college degree or university diploma. And just like everything else in life worth having, the competition is getting fierce. UT Austin has now cut back on their guaranteed acceptance rate from automatically accepting the top 10% of graduating high school seniors to only automatically admitting the top 8%. Is this an alarming new trend? How do colleges and universities look at their potential student bodies? And what tips and advice are out there for students wanting to get into the schools of their choosing? Tonight, the true cost of higher education. I'm Ernie Manous, and this is Houston 8. Joining us tonight are Vicki Alleman, Vice President of Marketing and Communications and Enrollment Management, University of St. Thomas. I think I got your title wrong, but we'll fix that in a minute. And Dr. Lyle McKinney, Assistant Professor of Educational Psychology, University of Houston. Welcome to both of you. Vicki, correct my title for you.
It's Vice President of Marketing, Communications, and Enrollment Management. It's a mouthful.
Yes, it is. But, okay, let's start right here. Everyone's talking about the cost of higher education. Are we seeing education costs go up significantly higher than what we're seeing as inflation in the community?
Well, I would say it has been a little bit higher than inflation because inflation has been so low. But we are doing everything that we can to keep costs at a minimum. But it's just like everything else. You know, we have labor cost. We have cost of buildings, electricity, et cetera, and all of that does go up every year.
Lyle, are people getting their money's worth? Is it a quality investment at this point?
I think it depends on where the student goes and attends, right, the type of education that they're looking for. But you kind of mentioned earlier that in today's job world, people almost expect you to have a college degree. So that students have to begin somewhere to start on an educational track, and that investment, there's lots of research that shows over time, investing in a college education, it is beneficial for you throughout your career in terms of the financial rewards that you reap.
It's safe to say in today's marketplace, if you don't have that diploma, you can survive in this community, but you might not excel to a level of financial security that's rich. I don't know what the correct terminology is, but I think that's pretty much different from generations gone by.
Yeah, perhaps. And I also think think that a bachelor's degree, people tend to think of a college degree as, it has to be a 4-year degree, a bachelor's degree that prepares me for something in business. But community colleges and a lot of technical and vocational training, a 2-year degree that allows you to go out and to be an electrician or to be a plumber, that can be very good paying jobs as well. It's not in the traditional sense that everybody, there doesn't have to be a 4-year fetish with higher education.
And I'd like to add to what he's saying, which is that we are a liberal arts university, and what we're seeing is more and more employers want students who can communicate. Mm-hmm. So they want you to be able to write and to speak. And those are very important aspects of also securing a job.
Yeah. I do want to go through a bunch of headlines now. We've been seeing a lot about education out there, and so as we bring them up, feel free to add what you... University of Houston moving toward Tier 1 status, something really wonderful just happened this week. They were rated very high in their research area. What does that mean for us as a community? Why is that important to have a Tier 1, UH become a Tier 1 university?
Right. I think a lot of the Tier 1 schools, if you called Texas A&M and UT Austin right now and said, what are the benefits of being Research 1, and the president here at UH could do the same thing. The economic benefit that it gives to the surrounding community and to the state in terms of research dollars, which can create new jobs, creating new knowledge, research that can improve the K-12 school system here. Bringing all of that into focus, I think, is a rational reason to become why we want more research universities across the state. And Texas, to have such a huge population, if you think about it, California, large population as well, and they're known for having the Berkeleys and the Stanford, lots, more than just a few great institutions of higher education. And for Texas, for the population that we have, just to only have UT Austin and A&M there are other schools, and UH now becoming one of those, that have the potential to also be really great research institutions.
Does it help the community of schools around it? If UH becomes Tier 1, or pretty much is going to become, does that do something for University of St. Thomas? Does it do something for the other schools in the area?
Absolutely. I think it elevates the image and the level of higher education in the city of Houston. So I think it's very exciting that they achieved Tier 1 status. I think it's good for all of us.
Yeah, and they're not quite there yet. There's a few more things they have to do, but their research is at the top level right
it needs
now.
to be, yep.
Something else that's in the news. University of Texas had an action against them for affirmative action for using race in admissions. And it's just been said that they are fine with the way they're proceeding with the policy. Vicki, can you take me into that a little bit more? What's going on there?
Well, you know, diversity is such an issue in Texas, and we were talking about that before we came on your show about how diversity, it is here naturally for us in Texas. So the universities that are in Texas, for example, we're a Hispanic-serving university. We are dealing with right now first-generation issues that students have. And so when you start to look at admissions policies, similar to what he was saying, you know, UT and A&M being the only two top-tier universities, they're in high demand. Well, the population's grown beyond what we can handle. And so what has happened is UT Austin now requested the 8%, and they got it. And for the student, it makes it much harder for them to get in to that particular institution. But other institutions that are very high quality in Texas, they can get into. So I think that, you know, it's something that, yes, it does affect the student, but they still can get into a really high quality university in Texas, and diversity is an advantage for all of us.
Sure thing, and Texas is a very diverse state, and these rulings are not saying that you can just look at a student's race and decide yes or no that you're in. The court's decisions are basically that diversity is a compelling interest, not only nationally, but for Texas as well, that getting more students of color, traditionally underrepresented students in higher education, access to higher education, that is truly important, that race can be considered one of many factors. It's not that race is the only factor.
And
I think that's important.
This suit was brought by two white students who felt they were denied admission because they were white.
Right.
But then the court's ruling is, no, that universities have a right to create the environment that they want, the campus that they want, as long as they treat everyone fairly. Is that a safe reading of that ruling? That
diversity is there's a compelling interest in creating diversity in higher education and producing graduates who are, come from lots of different diverse backgrounds. And so that considering race, again, is not 80% of the decision, but a small component of that. Right now the courts are saying that that's okay. This is likely to move up. Of course, this was a court of appeals, but there's been a few cases within the past couple of years, one being at the Michigan Law School related to this as well, and it's likely to keep climbing the ladder up to the U.S. Supreme Court within the next few years, I'm sure.
Okay, now we mentioned UT Austin. We talk about this 8%, 10%. Let's step back a little bit to catch our audience up on what goes on here. If I understand, and please, either of you correct me as we move through this, if you are a graduating high school senior and you were in the top 10% of your class and you applied to UT Austin, pretty much you were guaranteed to get in, correct? That's how we understand it. Now that goes for a lot of the state, or all the state schools, correct, in the state of Texas. Now UT Austin went before the legislature and asked to move that up to 8%, so it's leaving out that 2% of automatically getting in. So now you have to be in the top 8% automatically to get accepted, correct? I've got it so far.
Correct.
Why is this something that is bothering or concerning people?
Well, I can speak as a professional and as a parent because I recently went through this. I have a son who's a freshman in college right now. And parents are very concerned about their child getting a job. And so, you know, there's a perception that you have to go to a certain type of school. And there are parents who are very fixated on the name of the school. And UT Austin has a very strong and powerful name, as does A&M nationally. And so parents were very concerned that, oh, you know, my child has spent all of this time, worked really hard, he or she's in the top 10%, and now they can't get into UT Austin. Well, you know, it's not the end of the world. There are many very good, high-caliber universities, Rice University, SMU, TCU, you know, we have some really good universities in the state of Texas, and ours, of course. And so I think it's something that, you know, will continue to be a concern for people, because they want to go to UT Austin. But the reality is there's a limitation as to how many students that they can admit, as all of us have that issue.
Yeah, and then transferring in, is always an option too that a lot of students don't think about initially. They think that going as a freshman, could be the only way. That's the only thing they think, if I don't get in now. But a lot of students can begin at another institution and then transfer into to the UTs, the A&Ms, the University of Houston.
Help me understand admissions policies, though. So I'm in the top 9% of my class, and I apply. That does not mean automatically at UT Austin, and we're just using that as our example now with this move, that I don't get in. It means I don't automatically get in, that there are still slots available for and I keep saying, creating the landscape of the university, that the admissions folks are looking at other things to fill, and if I understand correctly, it's 15% of the class falls outside of that top 8%. There's a lot of percentages thrown around.
Yes,
top 8% of high school graduating, so in the totality of the freshman class at UT, there's still 15% that's made up from other students. Is that correct?
The statistic I saw for UT Austin was that it was 81% of their class last year was made up of that top 10%. Okay. So that only leaves them with, like you said, a little over 15% to fill in other ways. However, universities all have different kinds of criteria and different ways of admitting students, and it is very important to look at much more than the GPA and the test score, even though that's the foundation. So the best advice you could give a student in high school is to do well in high school and have a solid over a 3.0 GPA in high school on a 4.0 scale, and then also do well on your SATs and ACTs, and take them more than once if you have to. That's the best advice you can give them. But also participate in activities. Be in the band, belong to a club, become a leader of a club. Leadership, for example, at our university is very important. We like to see that in a student, and we think that's an indicator of success. So public and private universities look at more than the numbers.
Explain to me what you do look at. Is there a checklist that you're going? How exactly does this process work? A lot of us think it's very mysterious. You send in your application and you wait and pray, and then something comes back whether you're accepted or not. But what really goes into, what are you looking at?
Well, I can speak to how we do it at our university, which is similar to many universities. So first of all, we do start with your high school GPA, and then your SAT and or ACT test score.
GPA, is there a point where you say, this is their GPA, there is no chance, we don't go any further? Is there ever that kind of finite lines drawn or no?
I would say yes, there is.
Okay.
I would say yes, there is.
So you have to at least have something going GPA-wise that fits the criteria of the university you're applying for.
Yes.
Then you go to look at those standardized tests, the SATs, the ACTs. Why are those important, considering if you have a GPA that's of a certain level, why do we need to consider the others?
Well, it's been done in higher ed. It's one of those things, we've been doing it for a long time, and it has been an indicator. There is so much discussion now in the higher education world about how effective is SAT or ACT in predicting student success. And some people are saying not very much, and others are saying, but it's all we have. And high schools are not standardized. That really is a big issue. So that's what we see when we start looking at students. A student who comes from a high school where they went through a college preparatory curriculum, they took AP classes, they did honors classes, that's quite different from a student who didn't.
Do you always see that it reflects better in their SAT and ACT scores? If they've got no? See, that's
not necessarily.
Well, let me talk to you then about this. So why is this become the standard? Because we all know, some people choke on tests. It's one day out of your life. You say take it multiple times, yes. But for the majority of kids, it's that one day. Anything could go wrong. Anything could happen, yet their whole future is resting on these test scores.
Right.
How did we get to that point?
I think for the very fact that you have to have something to go on, right? You need some type of measure that can be kind of standard across the board that institutions can consider. And, we've kind of chatted some about that. The relative weight to that, I think, is what is where we get into trouble. If there's so much weight assigned to a particular test score and that's it, right? And that's all you're looking at. If it's one of many factors that you're considering, then that's a completely different perspective, I think. But I think institutions, and looking at the collective fact, like you said, being involved in leadership and positions too.
Right. We stopped you right after we got through the GPA and the test scores. What else is on this imaginary checklist of mine?
Well, in the state of Texas, many of us do look at high school ranking. So, for example, top 25% may be where other universities are in looking at a student, or it could be top 50%. You know, that in itself can also be a little bit of a problem for a student that went to, and I'll use an example of here in Houston, we have Bel Air High School, we have DeBakey High School. They're very good high schools that prepare students very well for college. So you could have a student at a Bel Air that has, over a 3.0, I'd say, and they might not be in the top 50% of their class. Well, you look at the fact that they went to Bel Air High School. So again, you're looking at the indicators of what kind of an education did they have and how does that help them in college. So those are the main factors that we're looking at, those three criteria: GPA, test scores, and high school ranking. And then beyond that, you start looking at leadership positions. Athletics also can be something. So for example, we have athletics at St. Thomas, so if a boy wants to play soccer, we have a soccer team. You know, if they want to play basketball, we have a basketball team. So that also can be why they apply to your school. And you're looking at the academics, but you're also looking at their athletics.
Which brings up a whole other area that we didn't say we were going to talk about. When you bring athletic programs in and you're using that as an indicator of getting into school, how does that enrich or detract from the university experience for the other students?
I think one of the perspectives, and there are a lot of issues on that, right? Higher education, originally, you go back to the colonial colleges, it was a professor and a classroom and the students, and that was it. And over time, higher education institutions, they operate in a free market much like businesses. So it's not uncommon now to see the Starbucks and the McDonald's and the nice recreation centers and those type of things. And institutions almost have to do it to keep up with one another. But a lot of people say, listen, that the college experience, it's about the holistic development of the student, that mentally, spiritually, emotionally, providing all of these services for the student body, and that's an important piece in addition to what they learn in the classroom. And I think athletics is an aspect of that in terms of leadership and team building and things like that, school support, bringing communities together.
Okay, stay with me on this one for a second. When you're casting a reality television show, you want to bring in certain characters, certain types, certain things to fill out the show. When you are casting a freshman class, do you do some kind of similar looking at the overall picture of how it all intermingles, or is each student being looked at individually?
Well, we look at each student individually at our university. At a private school.
Never a step back to see how that will play out as a group of people? It's more of an individual process for us. We look at the student and is this a good fit for them? That's our philosophy, is that we want students that are a good fit for our university, for them and for us, because that is the best indicator of success. Okay.
So.
A point that you had brought up, that there is right now some stuff going on in the Texas legislature about excluding financial aid for freshmen. Talk a little bit about what's going on with that for us.
Well, at our university, we're watching this closely because our students do receive federal and state aid, and what we're seeing is organizations that we're affiliated with are predicting anywhere from a 30 to a 40% cut in state aid, and what that's going to mean is incoming freshmen are not going to receive, say, TEG or Texas Grant Beyond Time, whatever they were receiving before. There won't be enough money. So we'll be able to keep awarding. So let's say the student's a junior, they'll give us money to keep that student going, but they're not going to give us money to help the new freshmen coming in. And so at St. Thomas, we've already adjusted our financial aid packaging this year to adjust for some of that loss because we knew that it was coming. However, we're concerned because it seems like it's going to be a deeper cut than we expected.
And there's a lot of research in higher ed that basically shows the strongest predictor of access is a student's ability to pay. And so a lot of my research focuses on financial aid and what can be the most effective use of it and how to get it in students' hands. So that is a very big deal in terms of access and cutting funding for students, the money that they need, because not everybody comes from the well-to-do families, and higher education is a huge financial burden for a lot of people. But as we kind of let off, it's needed in a lot of ways to get the jobs and to build the type of the American dream that people want.
There's an argument out there, and I'll take you through it briefly. The labor movement actually gave us the movement to say that universal education in the lower grades was for everyone, and that we had to make that available as a nation. And then the civil rights movement said all people in our nation should have access to this education. And as we move into this new century, we know that it's a prerequisite to get further along in your life and your career. So why isn't there a bigger movement to say there needs to be a free higher education movement? As we have with high schools and elementary schools, why is there not the same of free college? Thoughts?
Any thoughts on that about where you would begin?
That's a good question. I don't even know where to begin with that, except to say the legislature would have to give us a lot of money.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, because they have to cover the cost.
And
of
I'm not
education.
saying because there are the private institutions, as there are in lower learning, if you want to call it that, where they do have your options. But as far as a general, should it not be a right to every American now, since it's so needed to succeed, to be able to get a higher education?
Well, President Obama, I think it was in 2009, one of his stances, and he's been a strong advocate for education, for community colleges in general, is that every American should attend at least 1 year of post-secondary education. So first you have to get everybody to buy into that philosophy, and then, like you say, that's taxpayer money and a lot of it to provide a free higher education for everybody. Now, in theory, it sounds like a wonderful thing. It would be great and phenomenal, but the details of how to make that happen, how for it to unfold, would be interested to see how they would.
It would be like healthcare reform.
Yeah.
There'd be some challenges on this and some inner discussion about it. From where you both sit, is it disturbing, sad? Is there hope in looking at how lower classes are doing now, how high school education is going in this country, how students are, the dropout rates and all of that? Is that something that's alarming at the positions you folks sit at?
I would say from my perspective, definitely so, because I'm looking at the admissions of students and looking at their high school records and what they have or haven't done and what kind of an education they're receiving, what classes they're taking. And there's just such a disparity between high schools now is what we're seeing. You know, it's very difficult now to standardize between high schools. Sometimes in districts you can, but even within districts you have higher performing and lower performing high schools. So I think at the school district level, for example, in Texas, that's what they're grappling with right now, is trying to equalize it more. And I think it's a huge challenge.
Right. And I am given some hope in the trends that I see in higher education, that students from traditionally underrepresented backgrounds are attending higher education in a lot of ways, more so than in the past. But there's this whole movement now, which I strongly believe in too, that just having access to higher education is not enough in itself. To come in for a year and then drop out, we have to get these students through to graduation, whether it's a vocational, a technical degree, an associate's degree, or a bachelor's. Just getting them in the door is not enough.
How do we do that now, especially when we talk about financial aid is being pulled away and our lower schools are not building them up to get into this higher education, our secondary schools aren't doing it? How then do you ensure that these folks are not just going to fall by the wayside? And as our whole world changes into the technology people need to know and the work that needs to be out there, and as you were saying, simply communication skills need to exist, what's going to happen to these students, especially in lower income families that just are being left behind? Is this going to make the gap between the low income and the higher, middle and higher income families just so wide that you can't patch it?
I think people are recognizing that that is a possibility, and that's why you see so many people lobbying for higher education. Right now we're looking at huge potential looming budget cuts here in Texas, and higher education is taking a pretty substantial hit in that. Tons of research that says, listen, you have a more educated population, they're more likely to vote, be civically engaged, even be better parents, less likely to end up on welfare and in the prison system, which of course frees up that's money that the state's spending with tax dollars too. So I think that state and the federal government making higher education a priority is critically important through financial aid and programs that, whether it's providing mentoring or additional support and tutoring that help these students be successful. That's a commitment that as a nation we need to make.
All right, quickly, as we're running out of time here, though, I want to move us into a more positive thing. That Texas is a wonderful place for the East and the Northeast to come and mine our students. Talk a little bit about that.
Yes, we see that quite a bit, as a matter of fact. We've noticed when we go to college fairs that now, let's say there may have been 100 universities at a college fair, now there's over 200. And you look around and there are universities from the Northeast and the Midwest. And I know at our university we have seen students leave the state and go out of state because they received full tuition, especially the Latino students, because the universities there want the diversity. You know, we naturally have the diversity here, but they don't have it as much in the Northeast and Midwest, so they come to Texas. And also our population at the high school level is growing. And there are so many states now where the high school population is decreasing. So again, they're coming to Texas and they just think it's, you know, free for all.
When we make it sound a little bleak with the other areas that we're talking about, for a Texas student, especially a Hispanic Texas student, this is a good time. Maybe UT Austin has gone to 8% out of the 10, but there's a lot of colleges out there that are looking in here for us.
I think the students have a lot of opportunities now.
Yeah.
I really do. And, you know, not only when they go to the university, but when they're at the university, we have more and more programs for student success now. So I think all universities are doing that and focusing on it. We're doing more mentoring. We're doing more tutoring.
And for parents out there to know, the important thing is make sure students' GPAs are as high as they can be. Do good on those standardized tests. You're going to need to do those, and get involved in school. Civic activities, leadership, sports, all that will make them a more desirable applicant.
Absolutely, and seeking out counseling and advice from advisors at your high school, financial aid counselors at the college, where you're going to get the information, meet the deadlines, make sure you're in the know about what you need to do.
Well, thank you both very much for all that insight and for your information.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now each week we invite you to visit our home online at HoustonPBS.org. Simply click on the local programs bar, pick Houston 8, and you can join our online community. Read about the guests, learn more about the topic, and even watch past episodes. That does it for us tonight. Until next time, I'm Ernie Manous. Thank you for joining us. Have a great week.